Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jason with Jadren Aquatics. Thanks for hanging out with me in the fish room again today. So today we are going to talk about how to do automatic water changes on your fish room. Now, the way that I'm going to go over this is probably something you probably need at least maybe 5 tanks in the minimum to do this. It's probably a lot to try to set up if you're only doing 1 tank, but either way, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. But before we get started, if you guys have been looking for some guppies on my website and they've been out of stock a lot lately, I'm finally getting some more back in. So either by the time this video comes out or the next day, pretty much everything that I sell or every guppy that I sell is going to be back in stock. All right, when we're talking about doing an automatic water change system, the first thing that you have to do is you have got to drill your tanks. If you look back in the previous video that I did on designing the fish room, you guys will see all about how to drill your tanks. As you can kind of see back there in the back corner, as we got the tank drilled, and we've got the 1/2-inch elbow that sticks out of the water, so when the water reaches a certain level, it will begin to overflow, and that being the whole idea is we want to drip water into the tank. And then when it gets over that amount, it goes out the overflow. So in a sense, we're turning over water all of the time in our tank, or at least as much as we have the drippers going. Now we can set the drippers to do whatever we want and how often we want. That really comes down to you and how much water you want to change a day, how much you want to change at a time. But by using a timer, it'll make things extremely easy. Now every single thing that I'm going to use in this video, I'll link in the description so you guys can see what it is and quickly go see if that's the one you want, or maybe you want a different brand. At least you can get an idea of what we're going to use. Okay, so the first thing after we have got the tank drilled, we need to decide what we're going to do as far as a pump goes. Now there's a lot of different ways that you can do different types of pumps, but I've done this a while now, and the way that I found that's the absolute best is using one of these diaphragm pumps. And the reason that I like these so much is due to the fact that they can run dry and it's not a big deal at all. It will absolutely not affect them. So when your water reservoir gets low and it can't pump any water, which I guarantee you is going to happen about 1,000,000 times a year, it's not a big deal. This thing's just going to pump air and it's not going to do any damage to it whatsoever. If you're using any other type of submersible pump, pretty much every single one of them have to have water in them, or the motors will just burn up in them and they won't work anymore. So that's why I use this one. I've used multiple brands and I've had trouble with a few. This is the one. I actually have 2 of these at home, these exact same ones. So these things have been fantastic. They are not only highly reliable, I've had no problems with them whatsoever, but they are almost silent. So you can literally hang this thing on your wall and it'll cause almost no vibration whatsoever, or however you want to hang it, or if you just want to set it somewhere. Right here, this is completely temporary, the way that I'm doing this right now. One of the reasons that it's taken so long to get this video out is that I ordered one of the big, huge containers, the 275-gallon totes, and the person that I've been supposed to be getting it from has been a pain in my butt for about 3 months now. There's just been excuse after excuse, and the difficult part is, I know, Jason, you're saying go get it from someone else. Well, I know this person supplies multiple people that have fish tanks, so I know that it is a food grade tote, and I know that it's been cleaned the right way, so that I don't have to worry about. There's a lot of people out there you can't trust that are going to tell you that it's food grade because it's worth more. They'll sell it to you for more, but if that thing had anything in it that wasn't able to completely clean out of it, it's going to get in your water and it's going to kill your fish. So I don't necessarily have to have it right now. So all I'm doing for now instead is I've just got one of these, like a 33-gallon trash can, and I'm just going to use that for now. I can fill this up probably every day or every other day and still be able to do the water changes that I want until that tote comes in. So this setup that I have right here is completely temporary. Now the way that this thing works is, as you can see on the sides, we've got two connectors here, And these are just your simple connectors that hold the 1/4-inch hose. It's the same type of hose that you have that comes out of your ice maker. It's just a 1/4-inch rigid hose. Again, I'll link that down below so if you want to see what it is. One side is an inlet and one of it is an outlet. So this one right here is actually going into the bottom here. Now whenever you put this thing in the bottom, you want to make sure that you have something in there that'll hold it down. So as you can see, I've just run it through some PVC that's kind of heavy that'll drag it all the way to the bottom. That way it stays as close to the bottom as possible. That way when it's pumping water, when it gets to the bottom, it'll get as much water as possible out of it. And then the other end being the outlet, this is where we're going to run it to the rest of the tanks on some type of manifold system. So let's go ahead and let's break it down on how we get this thing set up. Okay, as you can see here, you can see ones that I'm putting together on the table before I actually get them set up on the tanks. And so what I do for each one is I set up an entire line of tanks. So, you know, if we look over here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tanks on a row on one shelf. So we're gonna run, you know, we're gonna set up 6, and then up at the top another 6, and then, you know, down at the bottom another 6. And again, we're gonna run it on some type of manifold system. Now what I mean by that is you could take this 1/4-inch tubing and you could run one all along these 12 and then elbow it down to this one and go all the way down to that one and then go all the way down and do all the other ones so that it's one continuous line, and then your inlet would be up here at the top. So the pump here would be pumping to this one inlet and flowing all the way through. Now, if your pump is a really strong pump, it's not going to be that big a deal. But what's going to happen is because it's all running in one straight line, by the time that it gets to this last tank here, you're probably not going to have the same amount of pressure as you have on the very first tank. So therefore, this tank is not going to be getting the same amount of water exchange daily as the first tank is. Now, you're always going to have a little bit of discrepancy between some of the tanks, but for the most part, we want to try to keep it as consistent as we possibly can. So that's why we're just going to run 6 at a time. So we'll have 6 of them that connect here in the middle, and then these 6 that connect here in the middle. So we'll have this entire manifold system here that'll go down, that'll have one going to this 6, and then one going to this 6, and so on and so forth. So it's broken up so that it's spreading the water much more equal. Now what you'll learn is these irrigation drippers that we're going to use, these right here, these things are rated at gallons per hour. The ones that I've got here are 2 gallons per hour. It really doesn't matter which ones you use because they're probably not going to actually drip what you expect them to drip. And when I say that is because these are designed to be hooked up to your water faucet at home based upon the water faucet pressure that you run out of your house. Now the water pressure that comes out of these pump that I have are going to be different, but it's not so much the gallons per hour that's coming out of them. You just really want some consistency from one to the next. So as you can see, I'm using 2 gallons on every single one of them. Now every single tank I have in here is a 20-gallon tank, so that makes it easy to always use the same one. But let's say you have a 40-gallon tank. Well, then what I would do is I would tee this off and I would put 2 of these on here so that I would have 2 of them going to one tank instead of just one. That way it's getting double the amount of water. Or let's say you are going to want to use a 10-gallon one, then instead of using the 2-gallon, you might use the 1-gallon on the 10-gallon. So there's a lot of different ways that you can mix and match them together. You can buy ones that are adjustable, and I have some, but let me tell you, I absolutely hate them because they're adjustable, but they're not, you cannot fine-tune them whatsoever. I mean, you can click them on about the 3rd setting and it'll start dripping, then you can put it on the 5th setting and it'll be absolutely pouring out. So there's no really way of knowing what it's going to do, and each one seems to work a little bit different than the rest, so you can't really get a good balance. But the best thing you can do if you're really wondering how much is this thing actually going to drip is you can get this thing started and put a cup underneath it and let it drip for like 15 minutes and then calculate how much much water actually came out, and then do the calculations to figure out how many gallons per hour is actually coming out of this. And that way you can dial your timer into how long you want to make these run. You know, if you want to do a 10% water change every day, that means you need to have 2 gallons that are going to the 20-gallon tank every single day, and you need to adjust for that. Everyone's going to be doing something a little bit different, so that part is completely up to you. All right, so again, we're using this 1/4-inch hosing. Let me tell you one thing, do not use the clear hosing that you buy at the regular stores like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. That's usually about the only kind they carry, because when the light is directly on those, it'll get algae built up in it and it'll clog them. And it's happened to me about 6 or 7 times, so I promise you it's not something you want to do, because those tanks will stop getting water. But the good thing about running this system is you always know when it's not working on a tank, because you'll see the water begin to drop in a certain tank and not drop in the others, and you know you have a problem there. So it's really easy to isolate where your problem is. Now you can see the kind that I got here is actually red. I just like to do mine in colors because I think it's cool, but I probably wouldn't use the red inside the tank. So this red is actually going to be running along the outside of the tank, and then I've actually used black here for the ones that kind of go down into the tank. And so the connectors that you use are 2 different type of connectors that I use here. These are just the easy, real quick disconnects where you just shove the hose in there and it'll snap. And then when you want to take it off, you just push this little outside rib here, and then you can pull it out really, really easy. And so I use T's and elbows. That's really the only 2 that I really use. You could get some of the ones that have like a cross, so it's got 4 outlets. So when you're setting up your manifold, you can make that work a little bit better. But again, I'll link those, so if you're interested in those, these things make life so much easier. And so what I've done, the distances that I've created here, this is basically the distance from the middle of 2 tanks. So from here to here is the middle of 2 tanks. That way this thing will actually center up on every tank. So let's go over there and let's look at the tanks themselves. All right, you can see it back here in the middle. Now, granted, it's not perfectly in the middle, but you can see how I've got it here. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can mount these things. The way that I do them is I just use these little plastic clips that are right here. These are ones that I get on Harbor Freight, but you can get these on Amazon also. I've just got them simply clipped right there. But understand with these clips, the little orange piece that you see there at the bottom has a little piece of metal through it. So if you let that get in the water, it is going to rust. And if it's in the water, you're going to get rust in your tank, and you're going to run a chance of killing your fish. This is the way that I'm doing it right now. The reason being is because with pulling orders up here, I'm constantly removing the lids. Whereas at home, I usually just create a lid, you know, that just opens up. But right now, I just use these full piece of lids. If you guys are curious about these lids, I'll link this above so you can see how I actually make these lids. And so you can see these things are just the exact size that they need to be. And so they just slide on there like that, and then there's just a gap in the back. Now you can notch it out if you want it to go better. Or if you don't want to use the clips, then you could actually do 2 different things. You could take this and you could drill a hole in it and then run your hose through there and then connect your dripper underneath it. That way the dripper won't pull out and it's stuck in there for good. Well, not for good, but until you need to remove it. It's not going to cause you any kind of problems, except when you want to try to remove the cover, then you're going to have to disconnect it. Or if you want to, you can just take this thing and just notch it out right here and make the notch just about the same size as the hose. That way when you slide it in here, just the friction of it going in there is going to hold it in place. And so therefore, when you push that cover in there, it's going to be locked in there, and you're not going to have any gap back there in the back. Because right now you can see that I have a gap. And then, you know, you would want to cut these and then tape them together so that this part can actually act as a flap and be able to open and close for you. All right, so now you've got everything set up. You've got the manifold built. You got it into your water. You've got the pump set up. Now remember, every single time that you add water to that thing, you cannot forget that you have got to put some type of dechlorinator in there. I use safe powder on all mine because one bottle of that stuff will last almost an eternity. It's crazy the amount of water that it actually does. If you forget one time to put that in there and this thing's doing a water change, you're going to put chlorine or chloramines into your tank and you run the risk of killing your fish. So always remember that. One more thing also to remember, wherever this thing is that's going to be dripping into your tank, you don't want it to be submerged, because if you submerge it like this, whenever this thing stops, it's going to cause the water to be sucked back up into this hose, and it's going to cause a backflow that's going to backflow into all of your lower tanks, and that's something that you don't want. So you want to keep it up in the air like that so that it's actually dripping outside the water. The other thing is you want to keep a distance between this and your overflow, because if this is dripping right over there beside your overflow, all it's going to do is it's just everything overflowing is going to be the fresh water that you're putting in there. So you're not going to be really doing any type of water changes. So in reality, the best way probably to do is to move this as far away from that as you can. That way it's dripping water here, pushing the water up over here and overflowing out, so that it's the older water that's going out and not your newer water. Okay, so it's all set up now, and you want to get your pumps going. Let me show you the absolute best timer that you can use. These are the timers that I use. They're real simplistic, but they operate from an app from your phone. This is just like a normal timer, but it allows you to operate it from your phone. So you can set this thing up to go off absolutely as many times as you want. So let's say you don't want to do big water changes. Let's say you just want this thing to run for 3 minutes at a time, but you want it to go off 40 times a day. With this timer, you can do that. You can do almost anything with these timers. These things are absolutely fantastic. I use them for my lights. I use them for my pumps. Great, and they're cheaper than buying normal timers on top of that. So again, I will link that down below also if you guys are interested in that. That's something that Patrick showed me, and I have been so thankful that I have this, because it's been fantastic. All right, there you guys go. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little bit about doing an automatic water change on your system. If you guys got any questions or comments, be sure and leave them down below. So thanks again, guys, and God bless.